Building rests on ancestral land of an Algonquin tribe, the Miami, although their name for themselves was Miamia, and the Pokagon band of the Potawatomi tribe who shared this land. My name is Ann Mannix, and I serve as your worship associate today. We welcome you. We come here for many different reasons: to find community, to seek personal and spiritual truths, to question, to nurture our heart and souls, to be nurtured and find comfort, to explore new ideas, to be together in peace. We welcome you, whatever brought you here. We come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope that you will find welcome, connection, challenge, and love here. We hope you will find a way to reach out to others in the congregation, in the local community, and in the wider world community through your relationships here. On behalf of the members and friends here, I extend a special welcome to all visitors who are joining us for the first time. As we step away from the world for the next hour, we ask that you turn your phone or other devices to silent and let us move into the service, willing to be authentic with each other, honest to ourselves, and open to connection. Currently, this congregation is between ministers, so the Sunday Service Committee is filling the pulpit with both lay-led and guest speakers. Our speaker today is Byrd Tetzlaff, a retired UU minister who is a member of the congregation. Now we will have the chalice lighting. At times, our own light goes out and is rekindled by a spark from another person. Each of us has cause to think with deep gratitude of those who had lighted the flame within us.
Is that it? Yep. Yeah, okay. I was going to tell the story of Persephone, but I changed my mind. So instead, I'm going to tell you a story from one of my favorite authors, Mark Twain. Now, in the latter years of his life, he wrote a lot of theological works. And this is from one of them, from an excerpt from Captain Stormfield's Visit to Heaven. We first meet Captain Stormfield just after he had died. And he is zooming on to his eternal reward, but he isn't sure where he's going. And he's really hoping he's going to the good place because he doesn't want to go to the bad place. And on his way, he meets someone else, and this other individual is also scared of where they're going. And so Captain Stormfield goes over to this individual as they're zooming through. He zooms over, and he comforts that individual. And they arrive at the gates of heaven, and this other person goes in. But Captain Stormfield is the wrong gate. It turns out that heaven is a very big place, and there are all sorts of worlds, not just earth. And he was supposed to go to the pearly gates, which are for earth. And he ended up at the other because he was helping someone. So they helped him go to the pearly gates. And he got in, and he was thinking, I don't know what's going to happen here. I know I'm supposed to sing God's praises for all of eternity, but I don't have much of a voice. But St. Peter says, don't worry about it. And he gives him a halo and a set of wings and a harp. And he waves him onto a cloud and says, sing your heart out. And so Captain Stormfield starts strumming the harp. And he could never play the harp before. And all of a sudden, beautiful music is coming out of it. And he could never sing before. But all of a sudden, he can sing, and he's having a wonderful time singing. And singing. And singing. And singing. And he's getting a little bored. But a few eons have gone by, and he's still singing. And then he notices some of the other clouds, the people who are sitting on them are taking off their halos and taking off their wings and shoving them underneath their clouds along with the harp and running off. And so he sings louder to make up for these, but it's getting really boring. So finally, he looks around and no one's watching, so he takes off his halo and he takes off his wings and he puts them with the harp and he puts them underneath his cloud and he runs off right into St. Peter. And St. Peter says, good, now that you got that out of your system, come and do the real work of heaven. And Captain Stormfield is invited to create good things and opportunities for others. And he has a wonderful time with it. And he's not at all bored. You see, Mark Twain didn't think that heaven was a place of eternal worship, but rather a place of meaningful activity. According to traditional Christian theology, we are all born sinners because we are descended from Adam and Eve. And they sinned by disobeying God when they ate of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And to punish them, God not only threw them out of the Garden of Eden, he also said that their descendants would have to pay by being sinners and suffering. That means you and me. But I would like to point out that in some understandings, Eve is not seen as a temptress, not seen as someone who disobeyed God, but rather she is seen as a liberator because she freed us from the prison of paradise. Paradise where no one grows, no one changes, no one evolves. She freed us. For our moment of thank you, Ian. The sermon title today is Random Thoughts on the Invention of Hell. Yes, I'm going to be talking about hell in a church that does not accept even the possibility of such a thing. I'm talking about it because we live in a culture that has been deeply affected by that idea. That belief is very prevalent in many churches. And so I thought, I'd give my 2 cents. Now, just to be clear, I am talking about a physical place called hell, a place of eternal torture, bodily torture, and it usually involves flames. Ironically, the people that believe in hell also claim to believe in a loving God, a God that cares about human beings. And I find those 2 ideas as being irreconcilable with each other. If God created hell or even allowed it to exist, well, if God did that, then I don't think God is someone I want to know. Now, a further ramification of hell is that the folks who believe in it try to live good lives, mainly so they don't go to hell when they die. But this suggests to me that those folks might want to cause all sorts of chaos if there were no hell. They wouldn't mind doing wicked things if they don't get caught. I'd like to suggest that those of us here would not do those wicked things anyway. I don't want to kill anyone, even certain politicians. But the reason I don't want to has nothing to do with being afraid of hell. It's because I want to be able to live with myself. And I'll bet most of you feel the same way. You don't want to hurt other people, and you don't want to be hurt. It's kind of the do unto the others mentality. But I digress. I'm going to start talking about the history of hell and how it came into our culture the way it did. The idea of heaven and hell is pretty much a Christian concept. And what it does is it focuses your energies on what's going to happen to you after you die. But strangely enough, most religions don't have that particular focus. In the Middle East, back in biblical days, most religions almost bypass that question, with the exception of Egypt, of course. You only have to look at the pyramids to know they thought the afterlife was pretty important. But for the rest of the Middle East, religion pretty much focused on the here and the now. It focused on survival. You asked the gods for a good harvest. You prayed for good health. And the truly blessed had a long and prosperous life. It was this world that mattered. Oh yes, there were ideas of the other world. The early Jews believed in a place called Sheol. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Sheol? Okay. Sheol was kind of a shadowy place. And it was an interesting idea, but it wasn't the focus of the religion. And Sheol wasn't torture. It was just shadowy. It was kind of The Greeks and the Romans talked about Hades, again, an underworld of shadows, not torture unless you count boredom, maybe. That was pretty much the worst you could say about it. The blessed might get to go to the Elysian fields, which sounded very promising, but the focus was on this world. The afterlife was barely mentioned. Now, in the Eastern world, there is a focus, but it takes the form of reincarnation. What you do in this life affects what kind of a life you are going to have afterwards. And there's no talk of eternal or even partial punishment, just a constant learning. Being born again and having to live another life was torture enough. So, except for Egypt, most religions did not emphasize the afterlife. They really did hunker down to the here and the now. And to be fair, that's pretty much what Jesus taught. He was an apocalyptic preacher, but he had a very different understanding of what the apocalypse was. He kept on talking about the kingdom of heaven, but the kingdom of heaven was here and now, inside each one of us. He implied that people should do good things just because they are good, and not because they expect some reward or punishment. Jesus seems to think that if his people took care of each other, if they were wise and loving and kind and fair, then God would take care of the Romans. They would cease to rule Israel, and the Jews would be free. No word on what happened to the rest of the Roman Empire. One assumes they would also benefit. But frankly, Jesus was focused on Israel and the Jewish people. Sadly, after Jesus died, the Romans did not leave Israel alone. In fact, they made it worse. And the new Christians were spread all over the known world. They weren't just Jews anymore, but all sorts of pagans, Greeks, Romans, and whatnot. And they each brought with them their own understandings of how things worked. And for the first 300 years or more of Christianity, the beliefs of the different congregations were downright contradictory. They had many ideas about many things, and one of them was what happens after you die. Some Christians believe that this world is hell, right here, right now. But if you believed in Jesus after you died, there was a way out. I'm a little fuzzy on what they were teaching if you didn't believe in Jesus. I assume you had to stay here. I'm not sure, but it was unpleasant. And then some Christians believed that there was a judgment day, and everyone would be judged, and most of us would go into heaven, certainly the people who believed. And some Christians didn't believe in hell at all. Remember, Jesus did not promote any of these ideas of hell. Jesus promoted people loving one another. He focused on how we treat each other right here and now. Now, you know, after a while, the Christian church became the Church of Rome. Nice. But there were still a whole lot of different ideas of what Christianity was. And the early Christians, they fought with each other a lot. So the emperor of Rome at that time, Constantine, was having a few difficulties, and he figured it would be a whole lot easier to rule if those Christians could get their act together. So he called the Council of Nicaea in 324 for the sole purpose of putting together what it is that Christians actually believed. Well, that worked for a while, but sadly, by the year 590, the church was losing power. partly because Rome itself was beginning to disintegrate, and the church was in a bad state, including financially. They elected a fellow who called himself Pope Gregory I. He was not a theologian. He wasn't even interested in spiritual matters very much. But he was a very good politician. And that's just what everyone thought the church needed. So Pope Gregory took ideas from different Christian sects, and he looked into the texts, and he tweaked things, and he put things together, and he came up with the hellfire and brimstone for all of eternity idea. And it changed the whole trajectory of the teachings of Jesus. The focus moved away from how we treat each other to worrying about what was going to happen after you die. And hell is a very powerful incentive. The fear of hell kept folks supporting the church so that they would be saved. And that gave the church a lot of power. Oh, and while he was at it, Pope Gregory invented purgatory. Now that was smart. Purgatory is not quite heaven, not quite hell. When you go there after you die, you're not good enough for heaven, but you're not bad enough for hell, so you kind of have to work it off. But, bonus, the people back on earth, they could pay the church to say masses, which would help you pay off your debt in purgatory. Cool beans. The church got wealthy and powerful. Good marketing strategy. So now you had this fear-based religion, but you could opt out of the bad part by paying for masses. And all of a sudden, the church was becoming very wealthy and powerful. They were making money hand over fist. And this worked for several hundred years. It kept the church solvent and in power, and everybody got on the bandwagon. Dante wrote a little something about hell. Did you know there are 27 different types of hell? One of them is for women who braid their hair to entice and seduce men. They are hung up by their hair over a flaming pit. And the men who allow themselves to be seduced, they too are hung up over that pit by a different body part. Strangely enough, there are very few depictions of heaven. And the few that we have are, frankly, rather boring. So anyway, the church is going strong, and hell was bringing people in and keeping them there. Martin Luther kind of messed things up, though. He didn't like what was going on. He didn't like that people were paying for salvation. And he got rid of that. The early Protestant churches did not have purgatory, but they kept hell because it's still a very useful idea. But then around 1648, Jane Leeds had her vision of eternal, universal salvation. Yes, she was the one who started our own Universalist movement. No hell. No possibility of hell. Now this has some interesting implications, because if there isn't any hell, what are we doing here? What's our purpose? Well, according to Jane, our purpose is to make this world heaven, or at least as heaven-like as we can. This is why the Universalists had such a strong influence on so many social justice issues. But what's in it for us today, those of us here? We don't buy the concept of hell as a theological reality. But I would pose that hell is not irrelevant, because I think a belief in hell can be seen as a longing for justice. Hell today is mostly human-centered, not something a God would create. The Holocaust, slavery, war, drug dependence, poverty, all human-created situations, human-created hell. And a part of us not only wants to stop these monstrosities, we want to punish the perpetrators. We want justice. But what is justice? For me, justice is a fairy tale, very much like heaven and hell. Personally, I see no real evidence of a justice, just occasional moments of it, like when we passed the Voting Rights Act, or when LGBTQ folks could finally get married. Human history and experience doesn't feel to me like something that's linear. Rather, it's a spiral of expectations and hope versus greed and self-serving. Take the Holocaust, and for a moment look at the perpetrators. What kind of anger, fear, and hatred must have lived in them? Or worse yet, what if they did not harbor that anger? What if they really were just following orders? That's almost worse. These were human beings doing unbelievably evil and torturous things to other human beings. All accounts tell tales of them going far beyond mere killing, but instead into torture of the most unbelievable kind. Sadly, the tales usually include stories of the perpetrators laughing at the pain and suffering they were causing. Doesn't a part of you want to see them punished? I do. A few of the guilty at the very top were tried at Nuremberg, but the worst thing that happened to any of them was a swift and merciful death, not the suffering that they engendered. The vast majority of the perpetrators never paid any price at all. Do I really want them to suffer horrendous pain? Part of me does. Not the better angels of my nature. Frankly, I understand the lure of hell, the wish for some sort of retribution. I wish I were better than that, but I'm not. I truly wish that people could see when they become monsters and become thoroughly, deeply, painfully, terminally ashamed. I wish they could sincerely want to change. I would also hope that I see when I am becoming a monster, and hopefully stop before I do any further harm. I don't believe in justice. To me, it is much of a fairy tale as is heaven and hell. But if hell is human-made, if hell exists here on earth because of human intent, because of human actions, then maybe heaven can be here too. And maybe justice, a human-made justice. I'd like it to live with us. I'd like to promote the idea that it is our job, our purpose, to make this world as good and fair a place as possible for as many as possible. And we can't do it all. It will never really completely happen, but we can do our bit. We can work for justice. We can try for fair play, for real chances at a better world. And maybe we can't wave a magic wand and set everything right, but we can each do something. Heck, if all we can do is to create a moment of kindness, a moment of thoughtfulness, a moment of seeing each other as important and valuable beings, that is something. It might change the entire experience for someone, to help lift them out of the dark place. Maybe that matters. Maybe we can matter. So be it. As always, there will be a talkback in the conference room after the service. I invite you to go get your coffee and join us if you will. I don't believe in hell. I don't believe in the possibility of hell. But some people live there anyway. I don't believe in justice. I don't believe in the possibility of justice. But I believe that we are called to work for it anyway. I do believe that we are called, each and every one of us, to do what we can to make this world better, fairer, kinder, more loving, and a safe place for all who live on this planet. We are called to be healers. We are called, whether by some higher power or simply by the suffering of humanity, we are called to make a difference. Let us respond each according to our gifts. So be it. We will now sing hymn number 125. And